They had to deal with the Athenians, who had unexpectedly marched out to meet them on the beach. When urgent news of the Persian landing reached Athens, the city faced an impossible choice that would define its future. They could surrender immediately. Many Greek cities had already submitted to Persia without fighting, accepting subject status. The great king was known to show measured mercy to those who bent the knee before bloodshed. Submit now, and Athens might survive, diminished. Subject, but physically alive. They could flee en masse, pack what could be carried, and scatter into the mountains or to allied islands. Let the Persians have the empty city, survive as scattered refugees, rebuild somewhere else, eventually. Or they could fight against impossible odds. The Democratic Assembly met in emergency session. The debate was fierce and emotional. The stakes were absolutely clear to everyone present. In the end, Athens chose to fight. 10,000 hoplites, virtually every able-bodied adult male citizen, were rapidly assembled. They marched northeast through the hills toward Marathon in full armor. They would meet the Persians on that beach and decide the fate of their city, their families, their democratic experiment in open battle against professional warriors. It was a desperate gamble with no second chances. The Athenians knew with brutal clarity they were outnumbered at least 2-1. They knew they had no cavalry to counter Persian horsemen, no archers to match Persian bowmen, no apparent way to counter the overwhelming Persian tactical advantages. They knew that if they lost this single battle, there would be no second army, no fallback position, no chance for their families except slavery or death. They marched anyway toward their fate. At their head rode 10 generals, the strategoi, one democratically elected by each of Athens' 10 civic tribes, by Athenian law. A supreme command rotated among them, each general leading for one day before passing authority to the next in sequence. It was a perfectly democratic system, ensuring equal representation. It was also a potentially catastrophic way to run an army during crisis. One of those 10 generals was a man named Miltiades, and Miltiades had a plan that would either save Athens or destroy it. Miltiades, son of Cimon, was unlike any other Athenian general in critical ways. He had lived for years among the Persians as a subject ruler. Earlier in his career, Miltiades had ruled the Thracian Chersonese, a strategic peninsula on the European side of the Hellespont, as a tyrant under Persian overlordship. He had attended the Persian imperial court. He had observed their military tactics firsthand. He had seen how the great king's armies operated, their strengths and weaknesses. And then he had turned against them when the Ionian revolt erupted. Miltiades had supported the rebels when the revolt was brutally crushed. He fled to Athens one step ahead of Persian execution squads. He brought with him something invaluable, intimate knowledge of the enemy. Miltiades understood Persian warfare like no other Greek commander. He knew that their fundamental strength lay in their 6,000 elite archers and mobile cavalry. He knew that their infantry, though numerous and disciplined, was more lightly armed compared to Greek hoplites. He knew that the Persian battle plan was always essentially the same: pin the enemy in place with sustained arrow volleys, then crush them with devastating cavalry charges from flanks. And critically, he knew how to counter it. The key was speed, closing the distance before Persian archers could systematically destroy Greek formations. If the Greeks could somehow survive the arrow storm and engage in close combat, then Greek hoplites, with their heavier bronze armor, their longer 8-foot spears, their disciplined phalanx formation would have decisive advantage over Persian infantry. But to accomplish that, the Greeks would have to do something unprecedented and seemingly insane. They would have to run, not march in careful formation, not advance methodically. Run at full sprint across 1 mile of open ground, covering the killing distance so quickly that the archers couldn't achieve sustained fire sufficient to break the charge. It was tactically insane. No army had ever attempted such a thing in recorded history, but Miltiades believed it could work. Now he just had to convince the other 9 generals. Athens did not face Persia entirely alone, but almost. When the Persian fleet was spotted approaching, the Athenians sent their fastest runner to Sparta begging for military help. His name was Phidippides, or Philippides in some sources. He covered 140 miles in 2 days, an almost superhuman feat of endurance that speaks to Greek desperation. Sparta agreed to help. The finest warriors in Greece would march to Athens' defense. But there was a problem. The Spartans were currently celebrating the Carneia, a religious festival during which sacred tradition absolutely forbade them to go to war. They could not march until the full moon several days away. By the time the Spartans arrived with their professional warriors, the battle would already be decided one way or another. Phidippides ran back to Marathon with the devastating news. Athens would stand essentially alone. One small city answered Athens' desperate call. Plataea, a tiny polis in Boeotia, bound to Athens by old ties of gratitude, sent every military-age man it had, perhaps 1,000 hoplites, to stand beside their Athenian allies. It was a gesture of extraordinary courage. Plataea had no formal obligation to fight. The Persians would certainly destroy them completely if Athens fell, but the Plataeans came anyway, marching to almost certain death out of loyalty. 10,000 Athenians plus 1,000 Plataeans, 11,000 Greeks total against 25,000 Persian professionals. The odds were desperate beyond calculation. But the Greeks had made their choice collectively. They would fight and die together. For several tense days, the two armies watched each other from distance. The Greeks had taken up a strong defensive position in the hills overlooking the plain of Marathon. It was tactically sound ground. The Persians would have to advance uphill to attack them, which would partially neutralize their cavalry advantage. The Persians, meanwhile, remained near their ships on the beach. They were in no particular hurry. Time favored them strategically. Every day that passed was another day for supplies to arrive, intelligence to be gathered, psychological pressure to build on the Greek position as fear eroded morale. The 10 Athenian generals debated endlessly in council. The cautious faction wanted to wait. The Spartans would arrive eventually with professional warriors. Why attack now, outnumbered and vulnerable, when reinforcements were coming? Miltiades argued the opposite with passionate intensity. Every day of waiting was a day for Persian cavalry to scout the terrain extensively, find paths around the Greek defensive position, prepare coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Every day was a day for Greek citizen soldier morale to erode, for fear to spread like disease, for the fragile alliance to fracture. And there was another terrible danger. The Persians might simply re-embark their army, sail around the coast to Athens, and attack the completely undefended city while the Greek army waited uselessly at Marathon. We must attack now, Miltiades insisted repeatedly, before we lose our chance. The vote among the 10 generals was split evenly. 5 for immediate attack, 5 for cautious waiting. The tiebreaker fell to the polemarch and the war archon, Callimachus. who held a ceremonial 11th vote in critical military matters. Callimachus looked at Miltiades. He looked at the vast Persian army deployed on the plain below. He weighed the terrible risks, the limited alternatives, the absolutely crushing stakes. He cast his vote attack. The assault would begin at dawn. The Greeks rose before the sun on September 12. Styristorevete Betse. None had slept well. How could they? Across the plain, Persian campfires had burned through the night, thousands of them creating a field of stars on earth, a constant reminder of the vast professional army waiting to destroy them, each man prepared for battle in his own way according to his beliefs and fears. Some prayed desperately to Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, to Zeus, father of gods, to the legendary heroes of old, Heracles, Theseus, Achilles, asking for strength, for courage, for a glorious death, if death was their inevitable fate. Some ate a small final meal bread, olives, a little wine mixed with water, enough to fuel the body for the ordeal ahead, not enough to slow them down during the charge. Some checked their equipment obsessively and repeatedly tightening leather straps, testing spear points, adjusting shields, finding psychological comfort in the familiar rituals of preparation. And some simply stood in silence, watching the sky lighten over the Persian fleet, contemplating their mortality. They knew exactly what they were about to attempt. Miltiades had explained the plan in brutally simple terms during the night. Run at them. Don't stop. Cover the distance as fast as humanly possible. Hit them before the arrows can kill you. It sounded like collective suicide. It probably was suicide by any rational calculation. But it was the only plan they had. The Greek army formed up on the plain as the first light touched the eastern sky. They deployed in a line roughly 1 mile wide, stretched deliberately thin to match the width of the Persian formation and prevent being outflanked. The center was deliberately weakened only a few ranks deep to concentrate maximum strength on the wings. Miltiades placed himself on the right wing, the traditional position of honor. Callimachus, the polemarch, commanded beside him. The Plataeans, their 1,000 loyal allies, held the critical left wing across the plain approximately 1 mile away. The Persians were also forming up in their standard battle array. 6,000 archers in front, arrayed in a long line, their composite bows already strung and ready. Infantry massed behind the archers, a deep formation of spearmen and swordsmen with wicker shields and short spears ready for close combat. Cavalry on the wings, though strangely fewer horsemen than expected. Some of the cavalry may have been away on foraging missions. The Persians were supremely confident. They had faced many enemies. The pattern was always the same. Predictable, the enemy would advance slowly, trying to minimize exposure to arrows. The archers would systematically thin their ranks. The cavalry would sweep around the flanks. The infantry would finish off the demoralized survivors. Easy. Routine. Another victory for the great king to add to his impressive record. They looked at the Greeks forming up on the far side of the plain and saw nothing to fear. They were about to learn otherwise. Miltiades gave the order. The Greeks began to advance. At first, they moved slowly, a steady walk, maintaining formation, shields aligned, spears upright. The phalanx rippled forward across the plain, bronze shields catching the early morning sun. The Persians watched, waited. The archers knocked their arrows but did not yet draw. The Greeks were still far away, still out of effective range. 400 yards. The Greeks walked faster. The pace gradually increasing, men who had been saving their strength now began to breathe harder. 300 yards. And then the Greeks began to run. Imagine it. 10,000 men in bronze armor carrying heavy shields sprinting across open ground. The thunder of their feet on the packed earth. The crash and clatter of their equipment. The rasp of breath through open mouths. They ran as fast as men can run, with 50 pounds of gear. The Persians stared in disbelief. This was not how battles worked. 6,000 arrows rose in a black cloud. The first volley struck. Men fell. Arrows punched through shields, through armor, through flesh. But the charge did not stop. The Greeks ran faster. The Persian archers loosed 72,000 arrows per minute at peak rate. The Greeks ran into that storm. 8 minutes of terror. 1 mile of ground swept by arrows. 192 Greeks died during the charge. The Greek phalanx hit the Persian line like a bronze thunderbolt. The Persian center, elite troops, drove back the weakened Greek center. But the Greek wings shattered Persian flanks, then wheeled inward in devastating double envelopment. The Persian elite suddenly found themselves surrounded, attacked from 3 directions. 6,400 Persians died on that beach. The survivors fled to their ships. 33-1 kill ratio, the most lopsided victory in ancient military history. The Greek army then force-marched 26 miles to Athens in 1 day, arriving before the Persian fleet. The Persians sailed away. Athens was saved. Democracy survived. The myth of Persian invincibility was shattered. Western civilization was preserved. Subscribe to Great History for more battles where ordinary citizens defeated professional empires through courage and tactical innovation.